Hey there guys, this is Handy Dandy, and today I'm going to be showing you how to assemble a Mod 9 V2 with the RP9 barrel. The RP9 barrel is probably the most affordable option for barrels at this moment. It's not the highest quality barrel, but it does play pretty well with 3D printing, and it can be had for $10 on CDN Sports. I'm probably not the best person to be doing this video, to be honest. I'm not an expert, definitely not a great videographer. I hope to kind of help some of the newbies especially be able to build this and get an idea of what they're doing. So I hope this helps. Don't hold it too far against me if this isn't the highest quality. It might be a little long and rambling. So I'm going to start by showing you some of the tools that you're probably going to need. You're going to need basic hand tools. So you're going to need a set of Allen keys, file, calipers, screwdrivers, razor blade, a little blowtorch, a good package of drills, preferably one that has the majority of the sizes here. I'm going to be using Barbarian units, so hopefully it doesn't throw anybody. You can use metric, you just kind of have to figure out what's going to work for you. This is kind of optional: soldering iron, hammer, some punches, hacksaw, bolt cutters, not needed. You're probably going to need 2 rolls of PLA. You might be able to get away with 1 if you don't mess up any prints whatsoever and you're not doing a brace or a stock. But as we all know, it's pretty easy to mess up a print. I recommend just starting with 2. This is atomic PLA. E-Sun is also a good option. ABS and PLA Plus is really the only recommended filaments for this. So I'm going to move a little bit of this out of the way, and I'm going to start by showing you the non-printed parts that we're going to need. So you're going to need a fire control group, AR-15. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. This is generally what's going to come in your kit here. I'm obviously using a printed set, so yours may look a little bit different, but this is the general idea. Go ahead and get your springs set up just like that. Just like that. I went ahead and I made my own pins so that they're longer and they're being supported. These are just the duplex nails. Depending on your exact trigger, you might have to go with a different size. Drill bits as well as screws or nails make great pins. You might notice a lot of my stuff here has been blued, which is a pretty easy process if you want to do it. Really unnecessary. This can be as fancy as you want it or as barbaric as you want it. As far as fasteners, there's a couple options. Sheet metal screws is a good one. This kit here probably costs $3. It's not a bad way to go. You can also glue those if you want to make them look a little nicer. I'm still going to use one of those because I don't have a large enough cap screw, but I really like using machine cap screws with these threaded inserts here. So that'll come off of there. And that part there gets put into the plastic with the soldering iron here. And then I believe these are M3s. I also have washers for them. They're a cap head screw. The hardware is really just a suggestion. The official README might actually give you different hardware, but there's a lot of different options that will work. I have shorter screws for the majority of it, and then those longer screws are for the barrel retainer. I've also went ahead and made up 1/4-inch pins. These are hardened rod that have been blued and then cut to size. We also have the RP9 barrel. Either dummy rounds or a round or 2 just to make sure everything's going together right. I'm not going to be able to go into making the full bolt at this time. Maybe either I will or somebody else will in the future. It's not very complicated to make. There is a lathe and a non-lathe version. The non-lathe version here uses a piece of pipe and then you weld that with a 5/8 rod Outside dimensions of this is 3/4, 5/8, also 3/4. You'll notice here you got an off-center hole drilled. That is where your firing pin comes through. It's really important for that hole to be very straight. This bolt is slightly different than V1. It is slightly shorter this way here. You got a bullet pickup tube, and obviously this has been blued as well. Really, this here doesn't matter a whole lot. If you're using a spring, which you have secondary buffers, either being the spring or an RC shock, depending on which end cap you go with. I'm using the retract end cap is what it's called. So I'm using a standard spring. If you're using the Scorpion stock, you're probably going to be using this as well. If you're using the normal cap, that will be a hydraulic buffer, and I don't have info on that. I haven't actually done it. Got a firing pin. This is just a duplex nail that has been made up according to this drawing here, and I definitely recommend print out the upper, the lower bolt, and the firing pin drawing, and that's kind of your main guide for making those. I used the lathe in order to make my bolt, mostly because drilling that hole straight is very important. You can do it without one. The drill press is highly recommended. If you're going to do it, I would definitely get what's called a center drill, and then make sure your surfaces are really nice and square here, and that'll make sure your drill bit doesn't wander. So you're going to want to make sure this is square on both sides, and then take a punch and put yourself the hole exactly where it needs to go on both sides. And then you're going to want to start with the center drill, and then you're going to go ahead and very slowly and very carefully drill up to dimension. That way you don't end up wallowing out your hole and end up having issues. If that firing pin doesn't align, you're going to be pretty sad when you have everything together and it doesn't work. On that note, another thing that'll get you very sad, if you print everything and you don't have your printer calibrated, and you find out later that you end up having to do 8 hours of sanding or reprinting parts, it's not going to be fun. Calibrate your printer. It only takes less than an hour. I think mine took me 15 minutes. Just do it. So what else do we need to cover here? We also have a pin to hold the firing pin in place in the bolt housing. That's just a piece of wire. I found that's the right size. We also have an AK spring here. This is the dead coil spring. This is going to be cut to 7 inches, so this will actually make 2. I cut a little piece off of one of those springs, and I'm going to use that because I'm using the retract cap. We also have an arrow here. This is a carbon fiber arrow, nothing fancy. You can get these pretty cheaply at a lot of sporting goods stores. Walmart has some for I think $5. These ones I bought in a large package because I am an archer. If you're having a hard time finding them, I would go ahead and try to talk to somebody that's in archery. They probably have a broken one of these. They'd be happy to give you. We use this because that charging handle is reciprocating and you don't want to add a lot of weight. This really is the best option. There are alternatives, but definitely go this route if you can. There's your info there. 7.6 millimeters, that's the outside dimension. It is pretty close to 8 millimeters. Spine is 500. Almost any 500 spine arrow should work. Because I'm using the retract cap again, I have some rod, and you can either get precision ground rod, which is recommended, or this is galvanized rod. Galvanized rod is not going to be as dimensionally consistent, so I had to do a little bit of filing on the ends to make sure it fit nice. I got a little cut there. What that does is that interacts with the lock and will hold my brace in place. You'll also notice I blued this, but I left the part where we're going to epoxy it into the blade so that it's bare metal. We'll get a nice good bite. On that same note, you are going to need some 5-minute epoxy. We're going to epoxy the bolt into the bolt housing. We're going to epoxy these rods. We're also going to epoxy the charging handle. Let's move on to printed parts. I'm going to move some things out of the way here. So printed parts. There are quite a few different end caps, and you can choose whichever one goes to the brace or the stock that you like. This particular one is a retract, so you need these guys here. The other ones you really don't. Some of these take the spring buffer, and then some of them take an RC shock. I don't know anything about the RC shock, but I believe in the README in the non-printed parts section there should be some info on it. I've just been using the springs because I have them and they're easy. Retract version just kind of pops together like that, and this is the orientation that I printed. Speaking of printing settings, I do 3 millimeters, 7 lines for my shell, and then 100% infill. You can do slightly less than 100%, but honestly 100% if you have your printer calibrated is better. I do tree supports on almost all of these. I think the only exception for that would be, some of these items that lay nice and flat. Pretty much everything else, you may or may not need it for the grip. I think you can do it without it. You can also do the lower receiver without supports. Personally, I just use tree supports because they're pretty easy to take off. You are going to want to get this as hot as you can without doing a lot of stringing, because that'll get you the best Z height, layer strength. But these are all in the orientation that I printed them in. You also have the ejector arm, the mag catch. That is the ejector mount. Charging handle that goes with that arrow. Got your grip. Got your mag well there. This is your lower receiver. This is the actual firearm portion. You also have a jig. This helps you hold the bolt in place while you weld it. There is a version 1 and version 2. Make sure you get the right one there. Really, all of these, the different versions are not exactly made to interact with each other, so it's highly recommended that you just go ahead and print everything from a specific version, preferably grabbing all the files at the same time so that you don't get partway through and have compatibility issues. There may be some items that are compatible from one to the other, but they're not designed like that, so it's hard to pin down what is interchangeable, and it's kind of just not worth it in my opinion. This is your bolt carrier shroud. It kind of goes around your bolt. We'll actually be epoxying this together. And then these are your specific barrel items, so depending on which barrel you use will be which exact upper and barrel retainer and feed ramp you use. This is all the RP9. So probably one of the first things we're going to go ahead and do here, well, I think that's probably it for this part. I'm going to call this the intro, and then we'll come back and we'll get some of this built.